Emma never thought it would come to this. Her once peaceful life, filled with the hum of family and routine, shattered the moment she crossed the line with Amir, the charming, enigmatic neighbor's son. But it wasn't just an affair. It was a betrayal that would destroy everything. Ryan, her devoted husband, worked tirelessly to provide for their family. But his long hours and silent distance had unknowingly created a void that Emma couldn't ignore. When the truth came crashing down, it wasn't just their marriage on the line. It was the very foundation of their lives. In this twisted tale of love, secrets, and revenge, the choices they made would set them on an irreversible path, leading to a deadly consequence no one saw coming. The Turner family had always been the epitome of suburban perfection. Ryan Turner, a sharp and ambitious corporate lawyer, spent long hours at his office climbing the ladder of success. His wife, Emma, was the picture of elegance and grace, a stay-at-home mom who took pride in caring for their two young children, Sophie and Lucas. Their home was beautiful, nestled in a quiet neighborhood where the lawns were always freshly mowed and the streets lined with trees. From the outside, it was hard to imagine a life more ideal. Ryan and Emma had been married for almost a decade, and while their relationship had once been filled with passion and shared dreams, time had slowly begun to change things. Ryan's career had taken off, and he was often away on business trips, leaving Emma to handle the daily routines of parenting and managing the household. At first, Emma had been content with her role, finding purpose in raising their children and participating in local social events. But as the years passed, the monotony of her life began to wear on her. The joy she once found in family activities had started to feel empty. Ryan's long hours at work meant he was often absent from family dinners and weekend outings. Their conversations grew shorter, more functional than meaningful, and Emma began to feel isolated in her own home. She loved Ryan, but the emotional distance between them seemed to grow by the day. Her friends, mostly other mothers from the neighborhood, tried to comfort her, but they too were preoccupied with their own lives. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something important was missing. It was around this time that the Rahman family moved in next door. The Rahmans were immigrants from Pakistan, and they brought with them a sense of quiet dignity that seemed to contrast with the more outwardly successful but increasingly strained atmosphere in the Turner home. The family was composed of Mr. and Mrs. Rahman, both in their late 50s, and their son Amir, a 26-year-old who had just returned from studying in London. He had been away for several years, earning a degree in engineering, and was now settling back into the family home to help his parents with their business. Amir was strikingly handsome, tall with sharp features and dark, thoughtful eyes that seemed to notice everything around him. Though he was respectful and polite, he also had a quiet confidence that drew people in. Emma first noticed him when he was helping his parents unpack boxes in their front yard. His smile was warm, but there was something else about him, an aura of kindness mixed with a certain mystery that intrigued her. Just as he had done with her, she found herself glancing over at the Rahman house more often than she cared to admit. Over time, small interactions began to happen between Emma and Amir. At first, they exchanged pleasantries when their paths crossed in the yard or during neighborhood gatherings. She would ask him how his studies had gone, and he would respond with genuine interest about her children or the latest book she was reading. The conversations were light, but there was an underlying connection that neither of them had expected. Amir was easy to talk to, and Emma found herself opening up in ways she hadn't with Ryan in years. At first, Emma told herself it was nothing. She was simply enjoying a conversation with a neighbor. But as weeks passed, the brief chats grew longer. Amir's presence became more comforting, a welcome change from the emotional distance she felt at home. He was a good listener, and for the first time in months, Emma felt like someone truly understood her. What started as innocent exchanges soon became more. Amir began to offer his help with various tasks around Emma's house, fixing a leaky faucet, trimming the hedge that had grown out of control, and even offering to watch the kids when Emma needed a break. His gestures, though simple, felt like lifelines in a life that had begun to feel suffocating. Emma was torn. She loved Ryan and wanted to keep their family intact, but she couldn't deny the spark she felt when Amir was around. She hadn't expected it, but the more time she spent with him, the more she realized that she had begun to care for him in a way that went beyond friendship. And yet, she couldn't bring herself to tell Ryan. After all, what would he think? Would he even notice? Ryan had been so absorbed in his work, so distant from her, that it seemed like he no longer had the time or the interest to care. But deep down, Emma knew that something was changing. She couldn't pinpoint when it had started, but the connection with Amir had begun to feel like more than just a fleeting moment of escape from the frustrations of her marriage. As the weeks slipped by, Emma's bond with Amir grew deeper, more complicated. It started with small things, casual exchanges over the fence, or quick conversations about books and family life. But soon, the talks became longer and more personal. Emma found herself sharing details of her life with Amir that she hadn't told anyone, not even Ryan. She confessed to him the emptiness she had felt in their marriage, how Ryan's long hours at work had left her feeling neglected and alone. Amir in turn listened attentively, nodding sympathetically, and offering her a kind of comfort she hadn't realized she needed. Amir's interest in her wasn't just surface level either. He didn't rush to give advice or make empty promises like some of her friends might have. He simply listened. There was something magnetic about him, an intensity in his gaze, a quiet strength in the way he carried himself. He didn't seem to judge her for the discontent she felt in her marriage, nor did he push her to open up more than she was ready to. His patience was intoxicating, and Emma began to find herself looking forward to their conversations more than she had anticipated. One afternoon, as she was outside in the garden planting flowers, Amir appeared at her gate. He had noticed that some of the flower beds were overgrown, and he offered to help tidy them up. Emma hesitated for only a moment before accepting his offer. There was something soothing about his presence, and for the first time in ages, she allowed herself to enjoy a moment of peace, without the weight of responsibility and expectation that usually weighed her down. They worked together, chatting in between the tasks. As they finished the last bed, Amir asked if she'd like to take a break and have a cup of tea. Emma agreed, and they moved into her kitchen. It wasn't unusual for neighbors to stop by for a quick drink, but there was something different about this moment. Their conversation flowed naturally, and the chemistry between them was undeniable. There were pauses in the conversation when their eyes met, lingering for just a moment too long. Emma felt a stirring in her chest that made her uncomfortable, yet she couldn't bring herself to look away. Over time, these moments became more frequent. What started as friendly gestures and small talk began to evolve into something more intimate. Emma would find excuses to spend more time with Amir, whether it was helping him with a project around his house or simply stopping by for a cup of tea. Each time they met, the connection between them grew stronger, and Emma began to sense that Amir might feel the same way, but she wasn't entirely sure, and the uncertainty added to the tension between them. Then, One evening, as they sat together in Emma's living room discussing a new book she had been reading, the line between friendship and something more blurred. As Amir talked about the themes of the story, his hand brushed against hers on the armrest of the sofa. It was a brief touch, but it felt electric. Emma's heart skipped a beat. She quickly pulled her hand back, but Amir didn't retreat. Instead, he looked at her, his expression softer than usual, and for a moment, the air between them seemed to shift. The next few days were filled with a tension neither of them could ignore. Emma was confused. She knew what had just happened. It was a moment of unspoken understanding, an invitation of sorts. But she wasn't sure what to do with it. She had never imagined herself in this position. She loved Ryan, and despite their issues, she didn't want to hurt him. But Amir was different. He was kind, attentive, and most importantly, he made her feel seen in a way that Ryan hadn't in years. Amir, too, was struggling with his feelings. He had never meant for this to happen. He had come back to the neighborhood to rebuild his life, to help his family, not to become involved in a complicated affair. But the more time he spent with Emma, the harder it became to ignore the attraction he felt toward her. She was beautiful, intelligent, and vibrant, and in his eyes, she seemed trapped in a life that wasn't fulfilling. He hadn't intended to be a source of escape for her, but he could sense the loneliness in her voice, the way she looked at him with longing. It was hard to resist. Their secret meetings became more frequent, each one more intimate than the last. It started with small, stolen kisses, quick, nervous, almost accidental. But with each encounter, the guilt that Emma had felt at first began to fade, replaced by a mixture of excitement and desire. It was a dangerous game they were playing, but neither of them seemed to be able to stop. Emma tried to push the guilt aside, telling herself that she deserved to feel desired, to feel wanted. Ryan was too busy, too preoccupied with his career to notice her needs. But deep down, she knew she was risking everything. The stability of her family, the life she had worked so hard to build. And yet, the pull of Amir's presence, his affection, felt like something she could no longer deny. As the affair continued, Emma found herself caught in a whirlwind of emotions. Guilt, exhilaration, fear, and longing. She knew she was on the edge of something dangerous, but the rush of feeling alive again was intoxicating. She was no longer just Emma, the mother and wife. She was someone else, someone who had a secret, someone who was desired. And as much as she hated herself for it, she couldn't help but crave that feeling more and more. Ryan had always trusted Emma. He had worked hard to provide for their family, to give them the kind of life he believed they deserved. The house, the car, the vacations, they were all signs of his success. But something had been off for a while. At first it was just small things, things that were easy to dismiss. Emma seemed more distracted, less present when they were together. She would sometimes stare out the window, lost in thought, as if she was somewhere else entirely. The spark they once shared had dulled, and no matter how hard Ryan tried to reignite it, it seemed like Emma was slipping further away. Ryan's suspicions had been growing over the past few months, but he didn't know what to do about them. He was often away on business, working late or traveling, leaving Emma to take care of the house and the kids. He had always trusted her, but the more he thought about it, the more he wondered if there was more to the situation than he realized. He could feel the distance between them, a coldness that had settled into their marriage, and it began to gnaw at him. One evening, Ryan returned early from a business trip. He had expected the usual: Emma preparing dinner, the kids playing in the living room, the mundane but comforting rhythm of family life. But when he walked into the house, everything was different. There was a silence in the air, an odd stillness that didn't feel right. Ryan paused, his senses on edge. He heard a voice, muffled but distinct, coming from the garden. He moved toward the sound, his footsteps soft against the wooden floor. The voices grew clearer as he approached the sliding glass door that led to the backyard. He couldn't see who was out there, but he could make out the words. Emma was talking, her voice low, but there was another voice too. Someone unfamiliar, a man's voice. Ryan's heart began to race, his mind raced through 1,000 possibilities, but one thought took hold and gripped him tightly. Could it be? He stepped closer to the door, careful not to make a sound, and peered through the glass. What he saw made his stomach drop. Emma and Amir were sitting on the patio, side by side. Their body language was too intimate, too familiar. They were talking quietly, but their closeness was unmistakable. Amir's hand brushed against Emma's as she laughed at something he had said. It wasn't just a friendly conversation, it was something more. Something that made Ryan's blood run cold. Ryan's breath caught in his throat. He stood frozen, staring at the scene unfolding before him. His mind spun, the realization settling in like a weight he couldn't lift. His wife, the woman he had trusted with his heart and his life, was betraying him. The betrayal was not just a thought, it was a reality, a truth he couldn't ignore. The sight before him shattered something deep inside him. He wanted to confront them, to rush outside and demand an explanation, but something held him back. He wasn't ready to face the truth, not yet. Instead, he stood there, helpless and watching, as Emma and Amir continued their conversation, oblivious to his presence. The anger began to simmer beneath his skin, but it wasn't just anger. It was a sense of betrayal so deep that it left him numb. Ryan took a step back from the door, retreating into the shadows of the house. His mind raced, trying to process what he had just seen. He couldn't believe it. Emma, his wife, had been seeing Amir behind his back. The thought of it sent a wave of nausea over him, the guilt, the shame, the anger. It all mixed together into a bitter cocktail of emotion that he didn't know how to handle. But he knew one thing. He couldn't let this go. He had to confront Emma. He had to know everything. The thought of the betrayal was unbearable, but he couldn't ignore it. He had to face her, even if it meant losing everything he had worked for. The next day, Ryan began his quiet investigation. He started checking Emma's phone when she wasn't around. At first, it was small things, texts from friends, reminders about the kids' schedules, but soon he found something that stopped him cold. A string of messages between Emma and Amir. Messages that were anything but innocent. They spoke in codes, talked about meeting up, about moments they had shared together. The words were intimate, filled with longing, and as Ryan read through them, he felt his heart break all over again. The messages were proof, undeniable proof of what he had seen. The affair was real, and it had been going on for months. Ryan's hand shook as he put the phone down. He wanted to scream, to confront Emma right then and there. But something inside him told him to wait. He needed to know more. He needed to understand how deep this betrayal ran. That night, Ryan didn't come home on time. He stayed at the office, pretending to work late. But in reality, he was lost in his thoughts, drowning in the pain of the discovery. When he finally did return, Emma was already in bed, her face turned toward the wall, as if she knew something was different. Ryan didn't say a word. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, and in the silence of the night, he made a decision. He would confront Emma. He would find out the full truth, no matter how much it hurt. But little did he know, that confrontation would change everything, setting in motion a chain of events that neither he nor Emma could have ever predicted. The day Ryan decided to confront Emma, he woke up with a heaviness in his chest. The weight of his discovery had settled in, and the disbelief had given way to a quiet, simmering rage. The more he thought about it, the more everything began to make sense. Emma's increasing distance, her late nights, her distracted behavior, all of it pointed to the same heartbreaking truth. She had been seeing Amir for months, and now he couldn't ignore it any longer. He needed to hear it from her own mouth. Ryan didn't wait for Emma to start the conversation. He couldn't. He was done being passive, done pretending he didn't know what was happening right under his nose. After dropping the kids off at school, he returned home earlier than usual. Emma was in the kitchen making coffee, her usual morning routine. She looked up when she heard him walk in, but didn't say anything, as if she hadn't noticed the storm brewing inside him. "Emma," Ryan began, his voice steady but laced with an edge he couldn't quite control. She paused, glancing at him briefly, then back at the coffee machine. "We need to talk." Her heart sank at the tone in his voice. She knew then. The silence that followed felt heavier than anything she had ever experienced. Emma was trapped between guilt and dread. She had never wanted Ryan to find out. She hadn't meant for it to go this far. But the affair had spiraled in a way she hadn't anticipated. Now, there was no escaping it. Ryan's voice broke through her thoughts. "I know what's been going on, Emma. I saw you, with him, in the garden." The words were sharp, like a slap to the face, and Emma froze, her hand trembling around the coffee cup she had been holding. She wanted to say something, anything, to explain herself, but she couldn't find the words. The truth was out, hanging in the air between them like an unbearable weight. Ryan continued, his voice tightening with each word. "How long, Emma? How long has this been happening? How long have you been lying to me?" His fists clenched at his sides, the pain of betrayal evident in the way his body tensed. Emma stood motionless, her throat dry, her mind racing for a way to explain herself, to make this somehow okay. But there was no good explanation, no way to take back what she had done. "Ryan, She stopped, unable to finish the sentence. She had no defense. Ryan's face contorted with a mixture of rage and heartbreak. "You lied to me for months, Emma. You kept this secret, and now I'm supposed to just accept it?" His voice cracked slightly as he spoke, a sound that cut through the tension in the room. "That's what you made attention." She shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes, but she couldn't look him in the eye. She had betrayed him, and no matter how sorry she was, no matter how much she regretted what had happened, the damage had already been done. "I never meant to hurt you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Ryan stood motionless for a moment, digesting her words. But there was no forgiveness in him, not yet. His mind was a blur of hurt and anger, and all he could focus on was the image of Emma and Amir together, the touch of their hands, the way they had looked at each other, the shared moments that should have been his. "How could you do this to me, Emma? To our family?" he asked, his voice strained with emotion. "What did I do wrong? What did I miss?" Emma didn't know how to answer him. The truth was, she didn't even fully understand why she had done it. The affair with Amir had started innocently enough. Just a friendly connection that had somehow turned into something more. At first, she had told herself it was harmless, that she wasn't doing anything wrong. But now, standing in front of Ryan, she realized how deeply she had betrayed him, and how little her own reasons mattered in the face of the hurt she had caused. "I don't know, Ryan," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I just felt so alone. I didn't know how to talk to you anymore. You were always gone, always working. And Amir, he was there. He listened to me." Ryan's face grew darker, a mix of disbelief and sorrow clouding his features. "So, that's it? You thought it was okay because I wasn't around? Because I was working too much?" His voice wavered with frustration. "That's your excuse?" Emma felt a sharp pang of guilt, and she wanted to reach out to him, to somehow make him understand. But she couldn't. The truth was, she hadn't even been sure of herself anymore. What started as a distraction, an escape from her own loneliness, had turned into something she never intended. The emotions, the moments of connection with Amir. It had all swept her up in a way she couldn't explain, but that didn't excuse her actions. "I'm so sorry, Ryan," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never meant for this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you. But I've made a terrible mistake." Ryan's jaw clenched as he processed her words, but the pain was too raw. He wasn't ready to forgive her. Not now. Maybe not ever. The wound was too deep. The betrayal too vast. Emma watched him, helpless, as he turned away from her. In that moment, she realized that whatever path their marriage might take from here on out, it would never be the same again. The damage had been done, and there was no undoing it. As Ryan left the room, Emma was left standing there, her heart breaking under the weight of her choices, knowing she had lost something irreplaceable. The days after Ryan confronted Emma felt like a slow-motion car crash. Each moment seemed to drag on endlessly, suffocating them both under the weight of their shattered reality. There was no turning back. The house, once filled with a hum of family life, was now eerily silent. Emma tried to salvage whatever semblance of normalcy she could, but nothing felt normal anymore. She went through the motions, making meals, helping the kids with their homework, but it was as if her whole life had been set adrift, with no anchor to hold it steady. Ryan, on the other hand, withdrew entirely. He spent hours at the office, working late into the night, not because he needed to, but because it was the only way to escape the suffocating atmosphere at home. He couldn't bear to look at Emma, not after what she had done. The hurt was too raw, too fresh. He found himself replaying that image in his mind, their neighbor Amir, touching her, laughing with her, while Ryan stood there, powerless to stop it. He couldn't stop thinking about it, couldn't stop imagining them together. It ate at him, gnawing at the core of his being. Neither of them spoke much in the following days. The kids, oblivious to the tension, continued with their routines, unaware of the fracture in their parents' relationship. But Emma could feel the weight of the silence pressing down on her, making every minute feel like an eternity. Every glance Ryan gave her was filled with unspoken accusations. The distance between them grew wider by the day, and Emma knew it was only a matter of time before the inevitable happened. And then the call came. It was a Thursday afternoon, just as Emma was picking up the kids from school. Ryan had called, his voice cold and distant on the other end. "I'm staying at a hotel tonight," he said, before hanging up without another word. Emma stared at the phone in her hand, her heart pounding. She hadn't expected this, not so soon. She had hoped for time to prove to him that she was sorry, that she could make things right. But now it felt like the final nail in the coffin. The silence in the house that evening was unbearable. Emma sat on the couch, her mind a whirl of guilt and fear. She couldn't stop thinking about the future, about how everything she had once known was slipping away, piece by piece. She had never imagined her life would come to this. Broken, fractured, with no way of turning back. Ryan didn't come home the next day, nor the day after. He spent the weekend at the hotel, calling only to check in on the kids, offering brief and impersonal updates on his whereabouts. Each conversation felt like a further separation between them, a reminder that their marriage was crumbling. And still, Emma tried. She reached out, sent him texts, left messages asking if they could talk. But Ryan never responded. The emotional distance between them had become insurmountable. Then, on Sunday afternoon, Emma received a call from Amir. She hadn't spoken to him since the confrontation with Ryan, and she knew the call was coming, even if she didn't want it. She hesitated for a long moment before answering, her heart racing. Amir's voice was soft, but there was an edge to it, something that told her this wasn't going to be a casual conversation. "Dane? Emma?" he began, his tone heavy with concern. "We need to talk." It wasn't a request. It was a statement, a command almost. Emma's stomach twisted. She had been avoiding him, hoping that time would somehow ease the situation. But now, she knew that avoiding him wouldn't make it go away. She agreed to meet him at a local park, a neutral place, somewhere neither of them would be seen. When they met, Amir didn't waste any time. "You know this can't go on," he said, his voice firm. "Ryan knows everything now. There's no going back. I don't want to be the cause of more pain for you, Emma. I don't want to complicate things more than I already have." Emma was silent for a long moment, her eyes searching the ground as if she could find an answer there. But there was no easy way out. She had hurt Ryan, and she had hurt herself. Amir had given her something that she had been missing for so long: attention, affection. But it had come at a cost she hadn't fully understood until now. "I know," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I never meant for any of this to happen. I didn't know what I was doing. I thought it was just a phase, just a way to escape for a while. But now, everything's broken." Amir nodded, his face softening with regret. "I never wanted to hurt anyone, Emma. But we both knew what we were doing. We knew the risks. I care about you, but I can't keep doing this. I can't be the reason you lose your family. You have to decide what you want." Emma looked at him, feeling an ache deep inside her. She had once believed that Amir was the answer to her unhappiness, but now, faced with the truth of the situation, she realized that nothing could undo the damage. Not with Amir, not with Ryan. The lies, the deception, the choices she had made. It had all led them to this moment, and there was no way to go back. "I don't know what to do anymore," she confessed, the weight of it all finally crashing down on her. "I just don't know." Amir gave her a sad smile, his eyes filled with understanding. "Sometimes there's no way out, Emma. Sometimes the choices we make have consequences we can't change. I think you need to focus on your family now, on healing." I can't be part of this anymore. And with that he turned and walked away, leaving Emma standing there, more lost than ever before. The reality of what she had done finally hit her with full force. She had lost Amir, and she was about to lose Ryan too. She felt like she was on the edge of something, but she didn't know what would come next, whether it would be redemption or the end of everything she had known. All she knew was that her life would never be the same again.